The Terran delegation stood in tense silence as the massive doors to the Draxian chamber slid open. Captain Hannah Park straightened her uniform and exchanged a quick glance with her security chief, Major Ta Kim. The weight of humanity's future rested on their shoulders. "Remember," she whispered, "show no fear." Ta nodded slightly, his hand never straying far from his sidearm. Though the Draxians had promised safe passage, this was still first contact with an alien civilization. Humanity had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel, and the invitation from the Draxian Confederation had come as a surprise to Earth's unified government. The Draxians were imposing creatures, tall, six-limbed beings with iridescent scales that shifted colors with their movements. Their compound eyes seemed to analyze everything simultaneously, giving the humans the uncomfortable feeling of being completely exposed. Their ambassador, who called himself Rector, approached with a fluid movement that seemed too graceful for such a large being. He raised his upper limbs in what the humans had learned was a diplomatic gesture. "We welcome humans to the Confederation," Rector's translation device announced in a slightly mechanical voice. "7 species united in prosperity." Hannah stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth, we thank you for this opportunity." The chamber itself was a marvel of alien architecture. Curved walls made of some shimmering material rose high above them, and strange symbols pulsed with soft light. Around a large circular table sat representatives of the 7 species that made up the Confederation. Each looked more bizarre than the last. Some with too many limbs, others with none at all. Some breathed through gills, others through specialized membranes. The negotiations began immediately. The Draxians outlined the benefits of joining their alliance: access to advanced technology, protection from hostile species that lurked in the dark corners of the galaxy, and trade routes that spanned thousands of light years. "We have much to offer your kind," said a jellyfish-like being that floated in a special tank. "Your worlds contain resources our species value." Days turned into a week, and still the talks continued. The humans, led by Ambassador Jin Lee, proved more stubborn than the Confederation had anticipated. For every technology offered, Jin demanded specifications. For every protection promised, he requested details of implementation. "The humans are surprisingly tenacious," Rector commented to another Draxian during a break. "They negotiate as if they hold equal power." "They are primitive," his colleague replied. "But interesting. Their planet has seen more internal wars than any species we've encountered. Perhaps this explains their caution." By the 10th day, the framework of an agreement began to take shape. Humans would gain access to Confederation medical technology and faster ships. In exchange, Earth would provide rare minerals and biological samples from their uniquely diverse biosphere. On the 14th day, the discussion turned to colonization rights. The Confederation offered humans a border world they called Delta 459, which the humans later named Novaterra. "It is rich in minerals both our species value," Rector explained, "and the climate is adaptable for human settlement with minimal terraforming." Jin studied the holographic representation of the planet. "And what guarantees do we have that our colony will be protected?" "The same protections extended to all Confederation members," Rector replied smoothly. "Our combined fleets patrol all settled systems." The human delegation exchanged glances. Something felt off about the arrangement. On the 17th day, as the final treaty was being prepared, Ambassador Jin Lee added an unexpected clause that caught the entire Confederation Council by surprise. "We require one absolute condition," Jin stated firmly. The room grew quiet as the translation devices relayed his words to each species. "The harming of human children will be considered an act of war against all of humanity. This is non-negotiable." The Draxians and other council members exchanged puzzled looks. Such a specific protection seemed odd to them. Rector tilted his head. A gesture the humans had learned indicated curiosity. "This is unusual. Most species naturally protect all their members equally." "Then you should have no problem agreeing to it," Jin replied without hesitation. After a brief conference among the council members, Rector turned back to the human delegation. Your young must be particularly vulnerable compared to other species. We accept this term, though we find it curious that you emphasize this specific protection. What the Confederation didn't understand was the evolutionary and cultural significance of child protection in human society. Humans had developed as pack animals with unusually long child development periods. Their entire social structure had evolved around protecting their vulnerable young. The treaty was signed with great ceremony. Captain Hana watched as Jin pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner, officially marking Earth's entry into galactic politics. Do you think they understand what that clause really means? Ta whispered to her during the celebration that followed. Hana watched the aliens mingling, their movements and gestures still strange to human eyes. No, she replied quietly. They see it as a quirk, a peculiarity of a primitive species. They have no idea. Within months, the first human colony ships departed for Novaterra. The border world quickly became a symbol of human expansion and adaptation. Human engineers worked alongside Draxian builders to establish the colony's infrastructure. Children played in the colony's central plaza, their laughter a sound completely foreign to the Confederation species. The humans reproduced quickly, observed a Krultan observer named Vex to his superior. The Krultans were one of the 7 Confederation species, known for their territorial nature. Their children are everywhere. The council approved their settlement, his superior reminded him. For now, we observe only. Neither species truly recognized the significance of what had transpired with that treaty clause. To the Confederation, it seemed like an odd but harmless addition. To humans, it was the most basic and fundamental protection they could imagine. Captain Hana Park, now appointed as Earth's permanent representative to the Confederation, often stood at the viewport of the space station overlooking Novaterra. She watched human children playing under the light of an alien sun and thought about the clause in the treaty. They have no idea what they agreed to, she said to Jin, who had joined her at the viewport. No concept of what humans are capable of when our children are threatened. Jin nodded solemnly. Let's hope they never have to find out. As Novaterra flourished in the coming years, the significance of that treaty clause faded from the minds of most in the Confederation. But deep in their archives, the provision remained. The harming of human children will be considered an act of war against all of humanity. It would be 10 years before the Confederation would understand what those words truly meant. 10 years had passed since the signing of the treaty between humans and the Draxian Confederation. The colony on Novaterra had grown from a small outpost into a thriving settlement where both species lived and worked together. On a bright morning, with both of Novaterra's suns shining in the clear purple sky, teacher Sue Kim checked her list one final time. 27 excited children fidgeted in line outside the school building, their voices filling the air with chatter and laughter. Remember to stay with your partners, Sue called out as she guided the children toward the waiting anti-gravity tram. The crystal caves are beautiful, but we must follow safety rules. The children, ranging in age from 7 to 10, wore matching blue school uniforms with the Novaterra colony emblem on their shoulders. For many, this was their first field trip to the famous caves that glowed with natural light from bioluminescent minerals. 8-year-old Da Li could barely contain his excitement. He bounced on his toes as the line moved forward onto the tram, his dark hair falling into his eyes. My dad says the crystals can sing, he told his friend Min Park. He helped map the northern section last year. Min nodded eagerly. My mom brought home a tiny crystal. It glows under my bed at night. The sleek silver tram hovered a few feet above its guide rail. Its transparent roof and sides gave passengers a complete view of the stunning landscape. As the children found their seats, Ja Ho Kang waved to his father, who worked as a technician at the transport hub. Sue did a final count, confirming all 27 children were aboard. 2 other teachers, Yan Cho and Jun Ba, helped distribute snacks and water bottles for the hour-long journey. Everyone buckled in. Sue asked, smiling as she moved down the aisle checking safety harnesses. As the tram pulled away from the station, Dai pressed his face against the window. The colony buildings gradually gave way to the wild beauty of Novaterra's landscape, purple vegetation and towering rock formations that seemed to reach for the sky. "Miss Kim, I can see the mountains already," Dad called out, pointing excitedly. Sue smiled, walking over to look where he pointed. "Yes, and the caves are just beyond that ridge." None of them noticed the small craft keeping pace with them from a distance, its cloaking technology making it nearly invisible against the morning sky. Inside that craft, 3 Kreltons observed the human transport with cold calculation. The Kreltons were one of the 7 species in the Confederation, known for their territorial aggression and resource-focused politics. Council member Vex, a high-ranking Krelton official, had traveled to Novaterra secretly. His scaled skin was a dull green, marked with the ceremonial scars of his rank. For years, he had watched the human colony with growing concern. "These creatures breed rapidly and consume excessively," Vex told his 2 followers as they tracked the tram. "Their resource usage has increased by 40% in just the last cycle. At this rate, they will strip this world before moving to the next." His aide, Trax, nodded in agreement. "The Council refuses to see the threat." "The Council is weak," Vex hissed. "Sometimes action must be taken to protect the Confederation's future." He had planned this operation carefully. A simple demonstration, nothing too severe by Krelton standards, would send a clear message to the humans. "A simple message will persuade them to abandon this outpost," Vex explained. "Humans are emotional creatures. They will not stay where they feel unsafe." Inside the tram, the children had started singing a song about the crystal caves. Sue joined in, her clear voice leading the chorus. The tram curved around a mountain pass, revealing the spectacular valley below. The path ahead would take them through a narrow canyon before reaching the cave entrance. "Look at the flying creatures." Jeho pointed to a flock of native animals that resembled Earth's birds, but had 6 wings instead of 2. The tram slowed as it approached the canyon, its automatic systems adjusting to the narrower path. It was at this perfect moment, isolated, with poor communication back to the colony, that Vex gave the signal. "Now," he commanded. His weapons officer activated the energy disruptor. A pulse of invisible energy shot from their craft, hitting the tram's propulsion systems. To the children inside, the first sign of trouble was a sudden jolt. Sue grabbed a handrail as the tram lurched. "Everyone stay in your seats," she called out, trying to keep her voice calm. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as the tram systems began failing one by one. The anti-gravity generators sputtered and died. For a terrifying moment, the tram hung in the air, 20 meters above the rocky ravine below. Then it fell. Sue lunged for the nearest children, wrapping her arms around them as the tram plummeted. The screams of 27 children filled the air, cut short by the devastating impact as metal crushed against stone. From his ship, Vex watched dispassionately. "A regrettable but necessary action," he said. "Monitor for survivors and record the response for analysis." The crash echoed through the canyon. The tram's emergency systems activated too late, only partially slowing the fall. The front section crumpled completely against the rocks. In the twisted wreckage, Sue Kim regained consciousness. Blood ran down her face from a gash on her forehead. All around her, children were crying and calling out. She pulled herself up, ignoring her own injuries, and began moving through the wreckage, helping children out of their harnesses. "Yeon, Jun," she called to the other teachers. Junba was unconscious but breathing. Yeon was already helping children toward the emergency exit. Sue counted the children as they gathered outside the tram, her heart growing heavier with each face she recognized, and those she didn't see. In the crushed front section, rescuers would later find the bodies of 3 children. Dadley, who had been so excited to see the mountains, Min Park, who kept a crystal under his bed, and Jeho Kang, whose father had waved goodbye at the station, never imagining it would be for the last time. The colony's emergency response was quick. Medical teams arrived within 20 minutes, treating the injured and transporting them back to the settlement. From orbit, Vex observed the rescue operation with detached interest. "The message has been delivered," he told his crew as they set course to leave the system. "Now we wait for them to withdraw." The Kreltons considered it a minor incident, regrettable but necessary collateral damage in their resource competition. In their culture, such tactical demonstrations were understood as political statements. They expected a diplomatic complaint at worst, perhaps some demands for compensation. "They will be gone within a standard cycle," Vex predicted confidently as his ship entered hyperspace. No species would remain after such a warning. What the Kreltons failed to understand was the significance of those 3 lost children. They had no conception of what they had just unleashed, of the line they had crossed, written clearly in a treaty they had dismissed as containing a curious but meaningless clause. As the news of the attack spread through the colony, a terrible silence fell over Novaterra. Parents clutched their children tighter. And in the communication center, the colony leader sent a simple message to Earth: treaty violation. 3 children lost. The Kreltons would soon learn what happened when humans' children were threatened. The message from Novaterra reached Earth in the middle of the night. It traveled across vast distances through the quantum communication network that connected humanity's homeworld to its first interstellar colony. Simple and direct. Treaty violation. 3 children lost. Within minutes, the highest levels of Earth's government were awake and assembling. President Han wore a robe over his nightclothes as he hurried into the crisis center beneath the United Nations headquarters in New York. "Confirmed?" he asked as soon as he entered. General Song nodded grimly. "Attack on a school transport. 3 children killed. Evidence points to Krelton involvement." The room fell silent. Everyone present understood what this meant. "Activate the emergency broadcast system," President Han ordered. "All nations, all channels." As dawn broke across different time zones, people around the world woke to the same message playing on every device and screen. Treaty violation on Novaterra. Return to your homes. Stay with your families. Further instructions to follow. Something extraordinary happened then. Nations that had fought each other for centuries set aside their differences overnight. Ancient enemies opened direct communication channels. Military forces that had trained to fight each other began coordinating their movements. In Beijing, military units moved into launch positions. In Moscow, nuclear submarines surfaced to receive new orders. In Washington, sealed bunkers opened to reveal technology that had been hidden from public view for decades. At noon Eastern Time, an emergency United Nations session convened. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered, their faces grim with purpose. The session was not broadcast to the public, but it was transmitted directly to the Draxian Confederation. Admiral Du Young Choi, the head of Earth's Space Defense Force, stood before the assembly. Her dress uniform bore the insignia of 5 nations she had served throughout her career. 10 years ago, she began, her voice steady, we entered into an agreement with the Draxian Confederation. One term was absolute: the safety of our children. Yesterday, 3 children were murdered on Novaterra. Screens around the chamber showed the faces of the victims: Dadley, Min Park, and Jiho Kang, 8-year-old children who would never grow older. The evidence is clear. This was a deliberate attack by Krelton forces, a member species of the Confederation. Admiral Choi continued. Under the terms of our treaty and the unanimous decision of Earth's nations, I am authorized to announce our response. She paused, looking at each representative in turn. Today, we activate Guardian. Those words sent a ripple through the assembly. Even among Earth's leaders, few knew the full extent of the program codenamed Guardian. Satellite feeds appeared on the screens, showing Earth from orbit. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then massive structures began to emerge from what had appeared to be ordinary satellites. Other platforms rose from beneath the oceans. Hidden installations on the moon powered up, revealing energy signatures far beyond what the Confederation believed humans possessed. Since first contact, we have presented ourselves as technologically inferior, Admiral Choi explained. This was a strategic decision. While we shared some advances with the Confederation, our most significant developments remained hidden. The screens showed orbital platforms unfolding into massive weapon arrays, ships previously disguised as research vessels transformed, revealing military capabilities. On the far side of the moon, a massive hangar opened, revealing a fleet of warships. In the Draxian embassy on Earth, Ambassador Rector watched the broadcast with growing alarm. He had always found humans puzzling, but had never considered them a military threat. Now he was witnessing the unveiling of technology that rivaled or exceeded Confederation capabilities. President Han entered the chamber and approached the podium. His face showed no anger, only cold determination. Ambassador Rector, he addressed the Draxian directly through the broadcast. You were warned explicitly in our treaty. The harming of human children would be considered an act of war against all of humanity. Now witness our response. Rector immediately sent urgent messages to the Confederation Council. The humans were mobilizing at an unprecedented rate. Their hidden military capacity was far beyond Confederation intelligence estimates. The Confederation leadership received these reports with initial skepticism. Surely this was emotional posturing from a less advanced species. Humans were known for their dramatic reactions. No doubt they would demand compensation, perhaps increased security. The matter could be settled diplomatically. This assumption proved to be a critical error. Within 24 hours, Earth's orbital defenses were fully operational. Every ship capable of interstellar travel was mobilized. Civilians volunteered by the millions for emergency service. In her office overlooking the launch pads at the Kennedy Space Center, Admiral Choi received her formal appointment as Supreme Commander of Earth's unified force. The document bore the signatures of every national leader. An aide entered with a personal message. Admiral, this just arrived from Novaterra. Choi opened the file. It contained a picture of her grandson, Jun, with his arm around his friend Da Li, the same Da who had died in the attack. The photo had been taken just 2 weeks earlier, before Jun returned to Earth for his father's medical treatment. The timing had saved Jun's life, but cost Da his. For the first time since the crisis began, Choi's composure cracked slightly. She allowed herself 10 seconds of grief before straightening her uniform. Assemble the command staff, she ordered. In the command center beneath the Pacific Ocean, Earth's top military leaders gathered. The room hummed with activity as officers from different nations worked side by side, united by a single purpose. The Confederation has responded to our demonstration, reported General Kim, head of intelligence. They express regret for the unfortunate incident, but claimed it was likely an accident or the work of rogue elements. Admiral Choi's expression remained unchanged. And the Krultons? They deny involvement officially. However, our intelligence confirms that Council Member Vex authorized the attack. Maps of Confederation space appeared on the central display. Key military installations, governance centers, and resource outposts were highlighted across dozens of star systems. They still don't understand what's happening, Admiral Choi observed. They think this is a negotiating tactic. She studied the strategic display, considering options. The Confederation was powerful, with technology developed over centuries of interstellar expansion. But they had never faced a truly unified Earth, nor did they comprehend the depth of human determination when their children were threatened. They believe us primitive, she told her officers, her voice steady. They think our technology is inferior, our resolve weak, our unity fragile. They base these assumptions on what we have chosen to show them. She pointed to a specific system on the display. Let us educate them. Prepare the fleet for immediate deployment to the Krulton mining moon K-17. We will give them one demonstration of our capabilities and our restraint. As officers moved to implement her orders, Admiral Choi stood alone for a moment, looking at the picture of her grandson and his lost friend. "We warned them," she whispered. "Now they will learn." Across Earth, humanity prepared for war. Not with the chaotic panic that had characterized conflicts throughout human history, but with a cold, unified purpose that would have been unimaginable before the treaty violation. The Confederation was about to discover exactly what the treaty clause meant, and what happened when someone harmed a human child. The Earth fleet moved through space with silent purpose. 50 ships, each larger than any vessel humans had previously revealed to the Confederation, traveled in perfect formation. At the center of the formation, the command ship protector carried Admiral Choi and her staff. On the bridge, Admiral Choi studied the holographic display showing their target, K-17, a small moon orbiting a gas giant in Krelton territory. The moon was uninhabited but housed automated mining operations that provided valuable resources to the Krelton economy. "All ships report ready, Admiral," announced Captain Jun, her second in command. Admiral Choi nodded. "Send the notification to the Confederation Council as planned." Captain Jun pressed a button on his console. Across Confederation space, an unexpected message appeared on all official communication channels. "Attention Draxian Confederation. Human forces will conduct a military demonstration at the Krelton moon designated K-17 in 12 hours. This area must be evacuated immediately. Any loss of life will be your responsibility." The message created confusion throughout the Confederation. Human military vessels had never ventured this deep into Confederation space. Most officials assumed it was some kind of error or bluff. On the Confederation capital world, the Council gathered in emergency session. "The humans cannot possibly reach K-17, stated the Krelton representative dismissively. "Their ships lack the necessary speed." Rector, the Draxian ambassador who had spent the most time with humans, looked troubled. "I would not be so certain. They have been unpredictable since the incident." "An unfortunate accident," the Krelton insisted. "They must be made to understand that such things happen in the development of new worlds." Rector's compound eyes shifted color, indicating distress. "They do not view it as an accident. They believe it was deliberate, and their treaty specifically mentioned." "A meaningless clause," interrupted another council member. "Surely they cannot expect an entire confederation to bow to their emotional demands." Back on the Protector, Admiral Choi gathered her command staff for final preparations. The ship's view screen showed K-17 growing larger as they approached. "We must be precise," she told them. "This is not about vengeance. It is about clarity." She looked at the images of the mining moon. K-17 was small, roughly 1/5 the size of Earth's moon, covered in automated extraction facilities. Scans confirmed no living beings were present. "Rather than attacking populated areas, I have chosen this uninhabited target," she explained. "We will demonstrate both our capability and our restraint." A young officer raised his hand. "Admiral, the Confederation still hasn't responded to our evacuation notice." "They don't believe we can reach K-17 this quickly," Admiral Choi replied. "They are about to learn otherwise." As the Earth fleet took position around the moon, sensors detected multiple Confederation vessels changing course to intercept them. None would arrive in time. "We will show restraint," Admiral Choi informed her officers, "but they must understand our resolve." On her command, the fleet deployed in a spherical formation around K-17. Each ship extended specialized arrays that began to pulse with energy. Between them, invisible fields connected, creating a network of force around the moon. In his private chambers, Vex, the Krelton council member who had ordered the attack on the human children, watched the proceedings with growing unease. He had not expected such a swift and organized response. Still, he remained confident in the Confederation's superior technology and military power. "Let them make their gesture," he said to his aide. "Then we will show them the consequences of threatening the Confederation." The Confederation Council received urgent reports as unusual energy readings began emanating from the human fleet. Nothing in their records matched the pattern they were observing. "What are they doing?" demanded the head of the council. The science advisor studied the readings with confusion. Unknown. The energy pattern suggests some form of gravitational manipulation, but at a scale we've never seen before. On the Protector, Admiral Choi gave the final order. Activate the gravity lance. The ship's arrays pulsed in perfect synchronization. Between them, space itself seemed to bend and twist. A beam of concentrated energy, invisible except where it distorted the light of distant stars, shot toward K-17. The Confederation observed with disbelief as the beam struck the moon. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the surface began to ripple like water. Mountains collapsed inward. The entire structure of the moon began to compress. By the first ones, whispered a Confederation observer, "What is happening?" The gravity lance didn't merely damage the moon, it collapsed its atomic structure completely. K-17's matter compressed to an impossibly dense point before exploding outward in a controlled burst. Where the moon had been, only scattered particles remained, forming a glittering cloud in space. The demonstration lasted less than 5 minutes. Silence fell across Confederation communication channels. Nothing in their experience had prepared them for witnessing an entire moon being destroyed with such precision. Admiral Choi stood from her command chair. Open a channel to all Confederation worlds. Her image appeared on screens across thousands of planets and stations. Her expression was calm, her voice steady. "I am Admiral Du-Young Choi of Earth. You have witnessed our response to the murder of 3 human children on Novaterra. What you have seen is one ship's capability, operating at minimal power." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You have 72 hours to surrender those responsible for murdering our children. This is not negotiable." The transmission ended, leaving stunned silence across Confederation space. The Confederation Council convened immediately an emergency session. The atmosphere was tense, filled with fear that had never before touched these ancient species. "How is this possible?" demanded the Krultan representative. Their technology was assessed as primitive compared to ours. Rector, the Draxian ambassador, pulled up the treaty text on his display. "They warned us," he reminded the others. "When we signed the treaty, they included the clause about their children. We simply failed to understand their evolutionary imperative." "One small moon is hardly," began another counselor. "They destroyed it completely," interrupted the science advisor. "With precision we cannot match." And their admiral claimed it was minimal power from a single ship. As the council debated, Earth's fleet split into smaller groups. They spread throughout Confederation space with astonishing speed, arriving at key outposts and installations. At each location, the humans followed the same pattern. They disabled Confederation defenses with surgical precision, neutralized communications, and took control without firing a single shot that would cause casualties. On a Krultan trading post near the border of Confederation space, Captain Sung led a boarding party onto the main station. The Krultan guards raised their weapons, but found them suddenly non-functional. "We have disabled your weapons and your communications," Captain Sung announced calmly. "No one will be harmed if you cooperate." Within hours, 17 Confederation outposts had been neutralized without a single casualty on either side. The humans demonstrated both overwhelming force and perfect restraint. As the 72-hour deadline approached, fear spread through the Confederation. The humans had revealed technology far beyond what anyone had believed possible. Their unified response showed a level of coordination that the loosely allied Confederation species could not match. In his secure compound, Vex watched the reports with growing alarm. He had gravely miscalculated. What he had dismissed as a weak emotional species had revealed itself to be something far more dangerous. "Contact the Council," he ordered his aide. "Tell them I am willing to discuss alternative solutions." The aide looked at him with all 4 eyes wide. "Sir, they are demanding your surrender." Vex's scales darkened with anger. "I am a council member. I cannot be handed over to a lesser species because of one minor incident." But as reports continued to arrive of more outposts falling under human control, even Vex began to understand that he had awakened something terrible, something that would not rest until justice was served. The Confederation had less than 24 hours remaining to meet the humans' demand. The Confederation Council chamber was silent as the countdown timer displayed on the wall showed just 5 hours and 17 minutes remaining. Every representative from the 7-member species sat rigidly in their seats, watching as Rector, the Draxian ambassador, stood to address them. "The humans have proved the seriousness of their demands," Rector said, his voice echoing in the vast room. "They have disabled 42 of our outposts without a single casualty. Their restraint is as impressive as their power." The Krultan representative hissed in frustration. "We cannot surrender to primitives. It sets a dangerous precedent." Rector's compound eyes shifted to a deep blue color, indicating grave concern. "They are not primitives. That was our mistake from the beginning. They showed us only what they wished us to see." On the main display, footage played of another Confederation defense station being systematically shut down by a single human vessel. The station's weapons, shields, and communications all failed in sequence without the humans firing a single shot. "We have no choice," said the eldest council member, a jellyfish-like being who rarely spoke at meetings. "The alternative is war with a species whose capabilities we have severely underestimated." In his private quarters, Council Member Vex paced nervously. His scales had dulled from their usual vibrant green to a sickly gray. Reports reached him every few minutes of more Krultan facilities falling under human control. "There must be another option," he snapped at his aides. "Diplomatic concessions, resource rights, technology exchange. Surely they will accept alternatives." His head aide looked at him with all 4 eyes. "The humans have been clear. They want those responsible for the deaths of their children. They want you, council member." A tremor of fear ran through Vex's body. In Krultan culture, to surrender oneself to an enemy was worse than death. It meant not just personal defeat but the loss of ancestral honor. The communication panel on his wall chimed. It was a direct call from the council chamber. "The vote is complete," announced the council leader. 26-1. "We will comply with the human demands." Vex stared in disbelief. "You cannot. It is done." The council leader interrupted. "Security forces are on their way to escort you and your conspirators to the human vessel." 2 hours later, Vex and the 7 Krultans who had helped plan and execute the attack on Novaterra stood on the transfer platform of the Confederation Central Station. Human soldiers in dark uniforms surrounded them, their faces showing no emotion. Admiral Choi stepped forward. She was smaller than Vex had imagined from seeing her broadcasts, but her presence carried unmistakable authority. "Council Member Vex," she said, her voice calm. "You are being taken into custody for the murders of Dali Minpark and Jiho Kang." Vex drew himself up to his full height. "I demand to know what punishment you intend." Admiral Choi's expression remained neutral. "Justice. Nothing more, nothing less." The humans led the Krultans onto their ship. As the doors closed, the Confederation officials present felt a strange mixture of relief and unease. The crisis appeared to be ending, but everything had changed. 3 days later, representatives from Earth and the Confederation gathered on Novaterra for the signing of a new treaty. The ceremony took place near the ravine where the children had died, now transformed into a garden of remembrance. President Han led the human delegation. "Today marks a new understanding between our peoples," he said as cameras broadcast the event across human and Confederation space, "one founded on mutual respect." The terms of the new treaty surprised many in the Confederation. The humans did not demand territory, resources, or even technology. Instead, the Confederation formally acknowledged humanity's protected species status, a designation typically reserved for primitive life forms under conservation. The irony wasn't lost on either side. The humans, who had demonstrated technology that could destroy a moon, were now classified as a protected species. But the designation carried significant legal weight in Confederation law. It meant that any aggression against humans would trigger an immediate and unified Confederation response. In a private meeting after the ceremony, Rector asked President Han about the fate of Vex and the other Krultons. "They will face trial according to our laws," President Han explained. "They will have legal representation and all rights of defendants in our system." Rector's compound eyes shifted in surprise. "You will not eliminate them." "No," President Han said firmly. "That would dishonor the memory of the children who died. We seek justice, not vengeance." This distinction puzzled many in the Confederation but fascinated Rector. In the months that followed, he devoted himself to studying human psychology and culture, trying to understand the seeming contradictions in their behavior. The trial of Vex and his co-conspirators was broadcast throughout human and Confederation space. Many aliens were shocked by the meticulous process, the careful presentation of evidence, and the opportunity given to the defendants to speak in their own defense. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, the sentence was not death but life imprisonment. Each Krulton would spend the remainder of their natural life in a facility on Earth, studying human history and culture, and contributing to educational programs about interspecies understanding. "They took life," explained the Chief Justice. "Now they must devote their lives to preventing such tragedy in the future." 1 year after the incident, Rector published his landmark study on human psychology. The work became the most read text in Confederation history, required study for anyone dealing with humans. The final passage became particularly famous. Humans appear contradictory, capable of both tremendous violence and remarkable compassion. Their most formidable characteristic is not their technology, but their ferocious protection of their young. When threatened, they transform from reasonable diplomats to unstoppable warriors. Any species contemplating conflict with humans would be wise to remember. They warned us, and we failed to listen. On the 5th anniversary of the incident, a permanent memorial was unveiled at the site where the children had died. 3 crystal pillars rose from the garden, each containing a holographic image of one of the children. The inscription at the base read in both human and Confederation languages, "They will never be forgotten. Through them, we found understanding." The ceremony was attended by humans and aliens alike. Admiral Choi, now retired, stood beside Rector as the memorial was activated. The holographic children seemed to smile at the gathered crowd, their images captured in moments of joy before the tragedy. "I still don't fully understand," Rector admitted quietly to Admiral Choi. "Your species demonstrated power that could have destroyed our entire Confederation, yet you showed such restraint." Admiral Choi looked at the images of the children. "That's what makes us human," she said simply. "We can destroy, but we choose to build. We can hate, but we choose to understand. We can conquer, but we prefer to coexist." She touched one of the crystal pillars gently. "But there are boundaries that must never be crossed." In the years that followed, humans and the Confederation developed a unique relationship. Humans remained technically classified as a protected species, but they became valued members of the interstellar community. Their technology, creativity, and particular perspective on justice enriched Confederation culture. Each year, on the anniversary of the incident, humans and aliens gather at the memorial on Novaterra. They remember 3 children whose lives were cut short, and they reflect on the hard-learned lesson about humanity's most sacred boundary, a lesson written in a treaty clause that now every species in the galaxy understands with perfect clarity. The end.